Hello everybody, welcome to the new Friends List. I'm Christopher Thomas Plante. You might know me from such shows as The Other Friends List. I'm joined today by my pal, my friend, my boss, Christopher Grant. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderfully, actually. Thank you.
That's really nice. Today we're talking about this little game called Call of Duty, namely the newest Call of Duty, the upcoming Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. And the question that I have for you, Grant, is how the hell is this game going to stay as popular this generation as it did in the previous generation? And I guess to kind of set that up, maybe tell everybody what the thing is about the newest Call of Duty.
It is the newest game in the Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter series. I'm really excited that Ubisoft and Activision... So Advanced Warfare, not to be confused with Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. Can you tell that video games are running out of ideas as a rule?
Warface.
Anyway, not to be confused with Warface, totally different game, is the newest game from Activision, and it's Call of Duty super brand, let's call it. And there's a couple things that you should know about Advanced Warfare before we start. One, it's a new franchise. They've been sort of following this these discrete sub-brands. So obviously Modern Warfare sort of started this off. Then we have Black Ops, now Black Ops 2. And Infinity Ward kind of came back last year with Call of Duty Ghosts, which ostensibly is the beginning of a new series, or probably a trilogy called Ghosts. And then, next year, presumably we'll have Black Ops 3. So one of the big changes here is that we're adding another brand, which also means we're slowing down the dev cycle for each of these games from 2 years to 3 years. And this is part of how I think Activision wants to stay relevant, is that when you're on top, there's nowhere to go but down. So they need to keep increasing their investment and keep increasing the quality of their games to really feed that audience, which is pretty demanding, and to get them to invest every year and now invest in an additional Call of Duty brand. And so I think a big part of that strategy is quality. And I think with Ghost, you saw an obvious dip in quality. You see it in the scores, you see it in the sort of reputation. And so with Sledgehammer, which is a new studio that was built pretty much to do this, they did co-develop Modern Warfare 3. If you want to believe the rumors, they were brought in after the Respawn team, the team that went on to do Titanfall, left Infinity Ward, and Infinity Ward needed help to finish MW3. So Sledgehammer, which was working on an action-adventure Call of Duty, again, if rumors are to be believed, was brought in to help finish it. And then when they were done, this kind of strategy of making them a third pillar in the Call of Duty development. There's a bunch of other studios that do stuff. Raven works on the Call of Duty series.
And Neversoft, and there's a whole... we should probably get to that towards the end, because that's where the story gets a little stranger. But for people who are curious just what the game is, it's... like all the Call of Duties before this, well, at least the most recent one, set in the near future, you shoot people, but the twist is now you have exosuits, kind of like in that movie Elysium that just came out, I don't know, a year ago, where you can jump 20 feet in the air and power kick people, or you have super strength, which is interesting because before, in the Call of Duty series, you had ones that took place in World War II, and then you had Modern Warfare, which the name, it says it all, and then you had Black Ops, which was the Cold War game, and they had kind of used time periods to make these discrete brands, but right now, the three brands, Black Ops, Ghosts, and Advanced Warfare, all are set in the not-so-distant future, even though I guess if you're into the mythos of Call of Duty, the lore, if you will. The lore, they're not in the same universe. I guess it's like Marvel, it's the shared expanded universe or something, I don't know. But I think it's interesting that they have this thing that looks like a superhero thing, and the word that they kept using with Ghost was stealth, if you want to believe that was actually a stealth game in any way. And then I guess Black Ops is the original flavor. And it's interesting that they're trying to set these things apart. I'm curious if you think there's a specific reason why they would want to diversify like that, rather than have every game be Call of Duty.
I think they would say they are all Call of Duty games, and that these are all big brands in and of themselves. I mean, I think we saw last year with the release of Ghosts, For a long time, Infinity Ward was the A team and Treyarch was the B team. And last year with the release of Ghost, it became very clear that that was no longer the case. That now Treyarch, especially with the release of Black Ops 2, which for all of its faults in terms of campaign, is the first Call of Duty campaign I didn't finish because it was terrible. But it was a really, great multiplayer game. If you think of things like zombies, right, this whole kind of co-op campaign that they've built and kind of created as their brand inside Treyarch. So there's some kind of there's sibling rivalry, I think, at play here, where these studios are sort of given a lot of resources, given a lot of independence from each other. And I know IW was always very protective of the Call of Duty brand when Treyarch was sort of brought in to iterate on off years. So again, seeing Treyarch sort of take the mantle from IW as the core kind of creative team, Jason West and Vincent Palla, I always get that backwards, left to form Respawn. So I think they think that these are discrete things, and part of that balance of having them be unique things is to really encourage them to sort of leapfrog each other and kind of
create some competition, basically.
Yeah, create some competition to push that brand forward. And so each one of these brands ostensibly gets its own unique modifiers. Zombies for Black Ops, for example. In Ghost, I think it was squad mode, which was panned by pretty much every review I read. So that was their attempt to create a kind of new experience for the Ghost franchise. I don't know if we'll see it revisited in the sequel or if they'll just try and improve it. We don't know what it is for Advanced Warfare. We don't know what is in Advanced Warfare. My big question with Advanced Warfare is, with the rumors that Sledgehammer was brought on, the core creative team at Sledgehammer came from Visceral Games. They were the team, and the general manager, Glenn Schofield, branded Visceral Games, made Dead Space at the company. And then they were hired away, and the original idea was that they were going to do an action-adventure Call of Duty, which would be much different, right? You would have the Call of Duty brand, but it would be a much different game, and it would be clearly differentiated. That is, at least the assumption being, not what Advanced Warfare would be. Plant, you wrote the report on Devil's Brigade, right? The canceled
the other
third-person action-adventure
Assassin's Creed type of game.
Yep.
And I think it's telling in a way that they have canceled that game multiple times. There were rumors that a similar game was being developed at Neversoft, or maybe multiple ones, one for mobile and one for console, and that they've continued to kill that project and still have first-person shooters that are distinguished brands makes me think they want to protect this, and they're being unbelievably tactical about how they do it. And I think having these brands, you're right, I think it creates some competition. But I think the other thing is it allows them to jettison a brand. Like, if you look at another big property or two that Activision has had in the past, like, say, Guitar Hero or Tony Hawk Pro Skater, that eventually ran their course and died, it was because you didn't know which ones were the good ones. And, at a certain point, there would be years where maybe they're a little better than the previous years.
Right.
Or maybe this is the bad one. And there was confusion, so you just assumed all were bad, so they eventually die out. Well, here it feels like, oh, you didn't like that one? Don't worry. We're not going to do that again. Those people who did it aren't going to do it again.
So Call of Duty kind of becomes a macro brand. And then
Yeah.
there's these sub-brands, these micro brands inside of that. So maybe, look, I love Call of Duty, but I'm a Black Ops guy, not a Ghost guy. Okay, sure. I think one of the things that would actually help that play is if these games actually felt more different. And like, for all it's worth, I think, Black Ops did a bunch of stuff right in Black Ops 2, but it feels very similar to other Call of Duty games. And I'm really curious if Advanced Warfighter, I said it again, Advanced Warfare, this is going to be a thing. If Advanced Warfare feels different, right? So, like, the balancing act for a Call of Duty game is that it needs to feel like a Call of Duty game. It has to have the right speed, the right agility. It has to have the right kind of gameplay. There's a competitive scene around it that really wants those things to feel right? Halo feels different than Call of Duty. Will this feel like a Call of Duty game? And if they modify it, if they make the player more agile, like in Titanfall, for example, now you have an exoskeleton, you can jump really high, maybe you can wall run. Will that change what it means to feel like a Call of Duty game? And like that's a big question. I think all the rumbling about an action adventure Call of Duty, Devil's Brigade, the original rumored Sledgehammer project, etc., they all pointed to a different kind of gameplay. That Call of Duty as a brand could encompass multiple styles of gameplay, not just this kind of fast-paced, twitchy FPS. So that's going to be really interesting if they've tried to modify. And now that they have 3 Call of Duty brands, maybe they have some allowance with the community, with their shareholders, whatever. They have some allowance to deviate from what we might expect from a Call of Duty game. And that's what I'm most interested and excited about. I think it's what made people so excited about Titanfall, was it was some of the DNA of Call of Duty modified.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think also Activision is not going to let this brand die. And when I say that, I mean, when you look back at the days of Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, they just had so many games. And they weren't afraid to overdose on a project, basically, and have the game seemingly run its natural course, which was for them into the ground, and they would have something else. But now they've really consolidated their catalog to basically this and Skylanders, and then some
and Destiny
projects. Yeah, Destiny. Yeah. Which we'll see where that. I mean, it's definitely what they want to do with that. Clearly, they want that to be another.
It's where their investment
core
is.
Brand. They put all their money into these 3 main things, and they have like money makers like tie-ins with the Spider-Man movie that can, I guess, make up for any lost revenue on, say, something like Ghosts that didn't meet expectations. But what's interesting about that is I think they're thinking harder about what they do with these things. Making sure that basically that these games will be hits despite themselves. That even if development goes sour on one of these, which is the thing that you hear in rumors a lot, is that certain projects have gone pretty far south, they will bring people in, like Sledgehammer, to finish Modern Warfare 3, and they will be able to make sure that it meets a certain standard by the deadline. They're almost vampiric in that they will have studios like Raven or now Neversoft, which has been essentially shut down and brought into the fold to bring talent into Infinity Ward to help them with their next version of Call of Duty.
Yeah, these previously standalone studios are now support studios.
Yeah.
For the larger focuses, which in this case are Call of Duty releases.
And it's, on a business standpoint, I guess it could be a solid strategy. It certainly worked for them. They certainly have gotten that game out on time every year, and it's worked. I mean, when you compare this to, say, something like Battlefield, they work when they're released. So there's an accomplishment there. The question that I would love to know the answer to, and people are careful not to give you any information on due to NDAs, is are people happy doing this? Maybe 3 years allows people to be happy. Maybe a 3-year dev cycle kind of loosens the burden on people, but I don't know.
I mean, I think there's like a big focus in the press on like what the lifestyle of the people developing the games are. But I think from a user standpoint, like, right or wrong, they don't care.
Yeah.
And we could write about like why don't we have unionization and things and crunch and whatever else, but like the audience doesn't care. They just care about quality. Like that's all they want. They want a better game than the year before. I think Ghost was a notable, sort of like MW2 in its day, was a notable step back. My favorite thing about MW2 is the whole no Russian thing, where they're like no Russian and they're serious about talking Russian, but then for a whole chunk of it they don't have masks on. Like, you're like a famous terrorist, and as long as they don't hear you speak Russian, they won't recognize you. Stupid. Anyway, so either way, like Ghost was a step back, and I think that was IW's first standalone game. Sledgehammer was busy making Advanced Warfare. Activision knows that they need these games to be hits, and they need to increase the quality threshold, and that the competition, let's say from places like EA, here's the good news about Battlefield 4 being an unmitigated, comically horrible disaster in every way, right on the heels of SimCity being an awful online disaster. And a lot of people don't remember this. Battlefield 3 was an online disaster when it launched. Like, this wasn't even unexpected. Is I don't think Battlefield 5, or whatever they call it, will be. Like, I think EA took a big enough hit in terms of revenue, in terms of credibility. But I think Activision knows that it has more coordinated, more competent competition in this space from
By the
EA
year.
in the form of Titanfall,
Yeah.
in the form of Battlefield games that are doing well, that are legitimate competitors in a lot of ways and are going to get better.
Destiny.
Even Destiny, I mean, it's internal, but the same way that Titanfall is going to eat some user base from Battlefield,
Yeah.
Destiny's going to eat some user base from Call of Duty. So, there's a lot of competition. In order to stay relevant, Call of Duty was built on the backs of consoles this last generation, right? Call of Duty 2 being a launch title for Xbox 360, and Call of Duty on PC before that was, it was a good game, and on the back of Allied Assaults in the same team, like, people were excited about it, but it wasn't the kind of a hit that Call of Duty 2 became.
Yeah.
And then obviously Modern Warfare sort of kicked things into overdrive. So the big, I guess, strategy here for them is that they know in order to be relevant this generation, at the beginning of this generation, obviously their first new generation launch game was Ghosts, which didn't really put them on the map. But in order to be relevant, they need to compete, and that competition is going to get more and more dangerous as the investment goes up and up from across the industry. Yeah. So for them, that means a 3-year investment cycle, a 3-year development cycle, and then maybe, and I think this has less to do with making the quality of life for the developers good. It has everything to do with increasing the amount of content they can put on a $60 price tag, increasing
Positive
the visual
side
fidelity. Like, there's a lot of work that they need to do to kind of continue to, it's almost like a drug addiction, right? Like, they need to have harder and harder drugs. Like, the users need more and more every year because it's FPS brinksmanship. Everyone's going to offer more and more. So the only way to stay ahead of the pack is to kind of continue to be on that cutting edge.
There's one thing that I want to talk about before we wrap that up, because I think it's one of the stranger points, and it's something Activision has been kind of fascinated with for, I don't know, at least 5 years. But throwing Hollywood names and style at the problem, which is to say what a Hollywood film would do. Oh, we have an action film. How do we give it credibility? How do we make sure that it's the big movie of the summer? We throw a big name on it. We throw an Oscar winner in as our superhero. We throw all the popular bands in there as the soundtrack, which was the Eminem thing that they did with Call of Duty in the past. And they've had a lot of popular actors in the past. And this year they have Kevin Spacey as the lead villain, who maybe he will be great in the game. He definitely sounds like he's giving his first line reading in the trailer.
Or maybe he's the lead hero. You don't know. Maybe you play as a young Kevin Spacey.
He plays
maybe
two
it's
characters.
Verbal from Usual Suspects, and he's all grown up. Yeah. Kicks butt.
But I think that's interesting that they are looking at that model of, to further guarantee our success, to have relevancy basically outside the game space is what that says to me, to make sure that the New York Times covers it, to make sure that they show up on late night shows. We're going to get those people who normally do those things. And that's fascinating because it goes so much further beyond the traditional development cycle and I guess promotional cycle. And the only other people I can think of that do that is Rockstar Games, and that they have to aim for an audience that's so much further beyond the people who normally buy video games.
Yeah, I mean, and Call of Duty, certainly like a Grand Theft Auto game, is unique in video games in that it is a mainstream cultural touchstone and not a sort of niche success. So we can look at something like Dark Souls 2 and talk about how it's a big hit, and it is in a lot of ways, and it is very niche. Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, like these things are much larger cultural touchstones, and I think you start to see the sort of gravity of those events, just like they do in big summer blockbusters, etc., pulls in this sort of related media like a hit song or a big star. You know what I always think of when I think of that? I think of Michael Pollan's sort of instructions on purchasing food from a grocery store, which is that the more they try and say they're good for you, the worse they probably are. So in the box, it's like heart healthy. It's like, don't buy that. Like, that's probably not good for you.
We're legit. We have Kevin Spacey.
And like the more you try to put on airs, the more I sort of am inclined to be skeptical.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because I look at something like the Kevin Spacey edition. Will Advanced Warfighter have a good campaign? Look, I haven't really liked an FPS campaign in a long time. I've been working on Call of Juarez, another Call of Gunslinger, for the last 6 months, and it's probably one of the better FPS campaigns I've played in a year, and I still can't bring myself to like play a lot of it. So I don't know. Will he be incredible? Will he win an Oscar for? Probably not. This isn't going to be like Smeagol here, but is it going to sell some copies? Probably. Is it going to get them on the front page of Yahoo, which it did? Yeah, it will. So that's, I think, really the strategy there, and that's more about appealing to the mainstream. You know, for the core audience, for the esports audience, like, is Warfare Advanced Warfare going to be what they want, what they're looking forward to? I don't know. Will it deviate and get some of the hardcore gamers interested the way Titanfall did? You know, it's a relatively small audience compared to the scale of the Call of Duty audience, but it's an important one. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions left for Advanced Warfare. I think it's an interesting strategy to see them sort of shuffle it up and add another studio into this mix. I think the team has done a lot of good work. If you look at the sort of pedigree of a lot of the people running that studio, like, there's a lot of stuff to be excited about. So yeah, I am cautiously optimistic. Ghosts. So Black Ops 2 was one of the first campaign, the first Call of Duty campaign that I didn't finish, and now Ghosts is the first Call of Duty game I never even played. I didn't even put it in my drive. Like, I just was like, could not muster the enthusiasm.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Grant.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Plant.
And thank you for joining me, you beautiful people who are watching this show. We are here every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.